I thought my grandpa would scold me for being dramatic, but his next sentence made my stomach drop when he asked who had been signing my name. The car was not the real problem. The problem was that my family had been living my life on paper. They told my husband I was unstable, but they forgot one thing. My grandpa did not build his empire by believing lies. When he opened the glove box, the document inside proved the entire family was a fraud. My name is Hazel Gomez, and at this exact moment, the only thing keeping me upright is the terrifying weight of the 5 pounds of sleeping infant strapped to my chest. The wind in February does not just blow. It hunts. It seeks out the gaps in your scarf and the holes in your gloves. It finds the skin you thought you had covered and bites down hard, leaving a stinging numbness that feels like a burn. I lowered my head against the gale, my boots crunching on the gray slush that covered the breakdown lane of the county road. My breath came out in short, ragged clouds of white steam that vanished instantly into the gray sky. My hands were raw inside my thin wool mittens. My fingers were wrapped so tightly around the rubber handlebars of the bicycle that they had locked into claws. The bike was a rusting mountain trekker that belonged to my husband, Caleb, from back in high school. It was too big for me. The seat was too high, and the rear tire was completely flat. Every step was a battle. I had to drag the dead weight of the metal frame through the sludge. The rim of the wheel ground against the asphalt with a rhythmic, metal-on-metal screech that set my teeth on edge. Scrape, drag, scrape, drag. Noah stirred against my chest. I felt his tiny head bobble against my sternum. I immediately stopped, dropping the bike to the ground with a clatter, and cupped my hands over the carrier to shield him from the wind. "Shh," I whispered, my voice cracking. "It is okay. Noah, Mama is here. We are almost there." I was lying. We were not almost there. The pharmacy was still 2 miles away. I checked the side pocket of the diaper bag slung awkwardly over my shoulder. I could feel the plastic ridge of the formula canister. It was light, terrifyingly light. There was maybe enough powder left for 2 bottles. Maybe one if I made it rich enough to actually fill him up. I had $10 in cash tucked inside my boot, wrapped in plastic so the snow would not soak it. It was the only money I had access to. My parents lived in a house with 6 bedrooms and heated floors. My sister, Brielle, posted photos of her $400 lunches on social media, and I was walking 2 miles in freezing temperatures because I did not have the authority to buy milk for my son. I picked up the bike again. The rubber handle was wet and freezing. Scrape, drag. I had to keep moving. If I stopped, the cold would win. If I stopped, the tears that were stinging the corners of my eyes would freeze on my lashes. I could not cry. Crying was a luxury. Crying was for people who had a safety net. A car swept past me, spraying a wave of dirty slush onto the legs of my jeans. The cold wetness soaked through the denim instantly, shocking my skin. I did not even look up to curse them. I just kept my head down, focusing on the rhythm. Left foot, right foot, drag the bike, don't slip. Then, the sound of an engine changed behind me. Most cars whizzed by at 50 miles per hour, eager to get out of the cold. This one slowed down. The hum of the tires on the wet road dropped in pitch. It was creeping. Panic flared in my chest, hot and sharp. My first thought was not that I was being rescued. My first thought was that I had been caught. Please do not be my mother. Please do not be Brielle. If they saw me out here, walking on the side of the road like a vagrant, they would not offer me a ride. They would take a picture. They would use it. They would send it to Caleb with a caption about how I was having another episode, how I was endangering the baby, how I was wandering the streets because I was mentally unfit. The vehicle pulled up alongside me, keeping pace with my walking speed. It was a massive black sedan, polished to a mirror shine despite the weather, a Lincoln, or maybe a Cadillac. It looked like a shark swimming through the gray water of the winter afternoon. The rear window buzzed. It slid down smoothly, vanishing into the door. A wave of heat escaped the cabin, hitting my frozen face like a physical blow. It smelled of expensive leather and pipe tobacco. I stopped walking. The bike handle slipped from my numb fingers, and the machine crashed into the snowbank. I did not care. I looked into the dark interior of the car. Frank Callahan sat there. He did not look like a grandfather. He never really had. He looked like a statue carved out of granite that someone had dressed in a $3,000 wool coat. His silver hair was brushed back, immobile. His eyes, the same steel gray as the winter sky, locked onto me. He did not blink. He did not smile. There was no pity in his face, only a terrifying, calculating assessment. He looked at my red, chapped face. He looked at the lump under my coat where Noah was sleeping. He looked at the rusted bicycle lying in the slush. "Hazel," he said. His voice was gravel, low and steady. It was not a question. It was a summons. I tried to speak, but my jaw was so stiff from the cold that I could only manage a nod. I felt small. I felt ashamed. I wanted to hide the bike. I wanted to hide my dirty boots. Frank leaned forward slightly, the leather of the seat creaking. His gaze shifted from me to the empty road behind us, then back to my face. "I gave you a car, right?" The question hung in the freezing air between us. It was a simple question, a factual question, but in my family, facts were dangerous things. Facts were weapons. I could lie. I could say it was in the shop. I could say I preferred the exercise. I could say I lost the keys. That is what my mother would want me to say. That is what would keep the peace. But I looked at Frank Callahan. He built an empire of logistics and shipping by smelling desperation and weakness. If I lied to him now, he would roll up that window and drive away, and I would never see him again. He did not tolerate liars. I swallowed the lump of fear in my throat. "Aunt Brielle has it," I said. My voice was thin, trembling not just from the cold, but from the sheer terrifying act of speaking the truth. "I have never had the keys, not once." The silence that followed was louder than the wind. Frank did not explode. He did not shout. He did not demand to know why. He just sat there, his expression unreadable. His eyes drifted down to the diaper bag on my hip. He saw the way the fabric sagged. He saw the outline of the nearly empty bottle. His lips pressed together into a thin, white line. It was a microscopic movement, but for Frank Callahan, it was the equivalent of a primal scream. He raised one hand and signaled to the front of the car. "Get in," he commanded. "Now." The driver's door opened instantly. A large man in a dark suit stepped out into the cold without flinching. I recognized him vaguely. Arthur. He had been Frank's driver for 20 years. Arthur moved with efficient speed, rounding the car and opening the rear door for me. "Leave the bike," Frank said. Seeing me hesitate, "It is Caleb's," I whispered. "I cannot lose it." "Arthur will get it later. Get in the car. Hazel." I stepped forward. My legs were so stiff I nearly stumbled. I climbed into the back seat, the warmth enveloping me instantly. It felt unnatural, like stepping from a freezer into a sauna. The door thudded shut with a heavy, reassuring seal, cutting off the sound of the wind completely. I sat on the edge of the leather seat, afraid to lean back, afraid my wet coat would stain the pristine interior. I unzipped my jacket immediately to check on Noah. He was still sleeping, his little face warm and pink. I let out a breath I didn't know I had been holding. Arthur got back in the driver's seat. The locks engaged with a soft click. We started to move. I gripped the door handle. My heart was pounding against my ribs. What had I just done? If my mother saw this car, if Brielle found out I was with Grandpa Frank, they would spin it. They would tell him I was lying. They would say I was hysterical, that I had stolen the baby and run off, and that they had taken the car keys for my own safety. They had a narrative for everything. They had been building this cage around me for 6 months, brick by brick, lie by lie. She is struggling with postpartum depression. She is confused. She forgets things. We are just helping her manage her finances until Caleb gets back. I looked at Frank. He was staring straight ahead, his profile sharp against the passing scenery. He had not said a word since I got in. He was not looking at me. He was thinking. I could practically hear the gears in his mind turning. grinding through the information I had just given him. The silence was heavy. It felt like the air before a thunderstorm. I wanted to apologize. I wanted to explain. I wanted to beg him not to be angry. The conditioning my parents had drilled into me was screaming, "Apologize. Make yourself small. Do not cause trouble." But I bit my tongue. The car approached the intersection. To the right was the turn toward my parents' estate, the temporary home that had become my prison. Arthur did not use the turn signal. The car glided smoothly past the intersection, continuing straight, heading toward the city, toward the highway, toward Frank's territory. My breath hitched. We were not going back. I looked at Frank again. This time, he turned his head slowly to face me. The hardness in his eyes had not softened, but the focus had shifted. He was no longer assessing me. He was protecting me. "This isn't about the car," he said. His voice was low, devoid of any doubt. He looked at the baby sleeping against my chest, then looked me dead in the eye. "What did they take, Hazel?" The question unlocked something inside my chest. It was not a sob. It was anger, cold, hard, crystallized anger. For 6 months, I had been told I was crazy. I had been told I was ungrateful. I had been told that my memory was faulty, that my math was wrong, that I was lucky they were even letting me stay there. But Frank Callahan did not ask if they took anything. He asked what they took. I looked down at Noah. I looked at his tiny hands, curled into fists. I thought about the formula I had to ration. I thought about the humiliating walk in the snow. I thought about Brielle driving my car to the spa while I counted quarters for milk. I looked up at my grandfather. Everything, I thought, but I did not say it yet. I took a breath. The heated air of the car filled my lungs, chasing away the cold that had settled in my bones. I realized then that I could not go back to that house. I could not go back to being the crazy daughter. I could not go back to being the helpless wife. I tightened my hold on Noah. I am done. I told myself, I am absolutely done. Drive, was all I wanted to say. But I just nodded at him. The truth was coming, and for the first time in a long time, I was not the only one who was going to have to face it. The silence in my grandfather's car gave me the first moment of clarity I had possessed in 6 months. As the heated seats warmed my frozen spine, my mind drifted back to the beginning. It had not started with cruelty. It had started with a deployment order. When Caleb received his papers for an extended reserve mobilization, we were optimistic. It was going to be a long tour, nearly a year, assisting with logistics and infrastructure in a region that was stable but remote. We had a plan. We had savings. We had the rental apartment in the city, but I was 7 months pregnant, and the lease was ending. And Caleb worried about me being alone with a newborn while he was thousands of miles away with spotty internet access. My parents had offered the solution with open arms. They suggested I move back into the family estate in the suburbs. They said it would be temporary. They said I needed the village to raise the child. They said they wanted to spoil their grandson. It sounded perfect. It was the trapdoor spider inviting the fly to tea. The transition from guest to prisoner happened so slowly that I did not notice the bars until they were already bolted shut. It began with the schedule. My mother, a woman who meticulously curated her public image as a saint of the community, decided that my sleep deprivation was a sign of incompetence. If Noah cried at 2 a.m, she would be at my door instantly. She would not offer to help. She would stand there, arms crossed over her silk robe, and tell me that I was disturbing my father's rest. She implemented quiet hours. She decided when Noah should feed. She decided when I should shower. Then came the isolation. My phone was the first casualty. About 3 weeks after Noah was born, I left it on the kitchen counter while I was changing a diaper. When I came back, it was gone. My mother claimed she found it near the sink, wet, and that it had shorted out. She promised to replace it. She brought me an old, cracked smartphone from a drawer 3 days later. It was on their family plan. It had parental controls enabled. She said it was for data safety, to prevent hackers from targeting military families. I believed her. I was exhausted, hormonal, and terrified of doing anything that might jeopardize Caleb's security. but the new phone meant she could see who I called. She could see my texts. Suddenly, my friends stopped reaching out. I found out later she had replied to them while I was sleeping, telling them I was struggling with severe postpartum mood swings and needed space. She cut the lines of communication one by one until the only voice I heard was hers. Then, the car. That was the twist of the knife that hurt the most because it involved Brielle. My grandfather, Frank, had given me that car as a baby shower gift. It was a sensible, safe SUV, fully paid for. He wanted Noah to be safe. He wanted me to be mobile. 2 weeks after I moved in, the keys vanished from my nightstand. I found Brielle in the driveway, loading her yoga mats and shopping bags into the trunk. When I asked her what she was doing, she laughed. It was a light, tinkling sound that made my skin crawl. She told me that a car sitting idle was bad for the engine. She said the fluids would seize up if it was not driven. She told me she was doing me a huge favor by keeping it in rotation. I tried to argue. I told her I needed it for pediatrician appointments. My father intervened then. He sat me down at the dining table, looking at me with that disappointed, heavy gaze he reserved for when I failed math tests in high school. He told me that I was in no state to drive. He said my hormones made my reaction times slow. He said he could not live with himself if I crashed the car with Noah inside. So, Brielle took the SUV. She drove it to her spin classes. She drove it to meet her friends for brunch. She posted pictures of herself leaning against the hood on social media with captions about her new ride. And I was given the bicycle. They framed it as a lesson in humility and health. My mother said the fresh air would be good for my baby weight. She said walking or biking to the store would teach me the value of effort, as if I had not been working full-time before Noah was born. They made me feel like a leech for living in their house, so the least I could do was not use their gas. That was why I was walking in the snow. That was why I dragged a rusted bike through the slush, while my sister drove my heated leather-seated SUV to get a manicure. But the control over my physical movement was nothing compared to what they did to my finances. Before Caleb left, we had set up a joint account for bills and a separate savings account for the baby. We had saved $6,000. It was not a fortune, but it was our safety net. Plus, Caleb's military pay was being deposited directly. The interception of my mail started subtly. I would expect a package of diapers from an online order, and it would never arrive. When I asked, my mother would shrug and say package theft was rampant in the neighborhood. Then, the bank statement stopped coming. I tried to log in online, but my password did not work. When I tried to reset it, the two-factor authentication code went to the phone number I no longer had access to. I confronted my mother in the kitchen one morning. She was making a smoothie, the blender whirring loudly, drowning out my first attempt to speak. When she finally turned to me, she wiped her hands on a towel and gave me a pitying look. She told me that I had been making erratic purchases. She said I had ordered $500 worth of useless baby clothes that never arrived. She claimed she had spoken to the bank to secure the account because I was clearly not in my right mind. She said she was holding the debit card for safekeeping. I demanded to see the card. I demanded to see the balance. She pulled a single sheet of paper from a drawer. It was a printed spreadsheet, not an official bank statement. It showed a list of expenses: rent, utilities, groceries, diapers. The numbers were astronomical. According to her sheet, I was contributing $2,000 a month to the household expenses. She pointed to the bottom line. It showed a negative balance. She told me I was draining them dry. She said Caleb's pay was barely covering the cost of the organic food they bought for me, the electricity I used staying up all night with the baby, the water for the extra laundry. I felt a pit of shame open up in my stomach. I did not know how much electricity cost in a house that size. I did not know the price of the specific organic kale she insisted on buying. I just knew that I was a burden. But the math did not sit right in my head. I started watching Brielle. Brielle did not have a job. She was an aspiring influencer, which meant she spent her days curating outfits and taking photos. Yet, 3 days after my mother told me we were broke, Brielle walked in with a new handbag. I knew the brand. I knew the model. It cost nearly $3,000. When I asked about it, Brielle rolled her eyes. She said it was a gift from an admirer. She said I was jealous. Then there were the spa days. My mother and Brielle would leave for 6 hours at a time, coming back smelling of eucalyptus and expensive oils. They would talk about the facials and the massages. Meanwhile, I was counting out change to buy generic formula because my mother said the name brand was too expensive for our budget. I began to notice other things. Letters from the insurance company that were opened and then taped shut again. A credit card offer addressed to me that I found in the trash, torn in half, but with the activation sticker missing. I tried to ask Caleb about the money during our rare, brief video calls, but my parents were always in the room. They would hover behind me, smiling and waving at the camera. My mother would squeeze my shoulder, her fingers digging into my muscle. A silent warning. They had coached me on what to say. Do not worry him, they said. He is in a dangerous place. If you tell him you are stressed about money, he will be distracted. He could get hurt. Do you want his death on your conscience? That was their trump card. They weaponized my husband's safety against me. They told me that a good military wife carries the burden alone. They told me that complaining about finances was a betrayal of his sacrifice. So I smiled at the camera. I told Caleb everything was fine. I told him his in-laws were taking such good care of us, and I watched the relief on his face, hating myself for the lie. The worst part, the part that kept me awake at night staring at the ceiling, was the gaslighting regarding my sanity. They never hit me. They never starved Noah. But they made me question my own reality every single hour of every single day. If I put my keys on the hook, they would move them to the couch and ask why I was so careless. If I fed Noah at noon, they would ask me at 2 why I had not fed him since breakfast. When I protested, they would look at each other with sad, knowing glances. She is having an episode, Brielle would whisper, loud enough for me to hear. It is the hormones, my mother would reply. Poor thing. She does not even know what day it is. They use the term unstable so often it began to sound like my name. One evening, about a week before Frank picked me up, I reached my breaking point. I found a receipt in the trash for a dinner Brielle had gone to. It was for $400. The date on the receipt was the same day my mother had told me we could not afford the special colic relief drops Noah needed. I marched into the living room. I held up the receipt. I was shaking. I screamed at them. I told them they were thieves. I told them I was taking Noah and leaving. The room went deadly silent. My father stood up. He did not look angry. He looked sad. He walked over to the mantel and picked up a file folder. He told me to sit down. He opened the folder. Inside were printed emails. They were emails I had never written. They were rambling, incoherent messages sent to my doctor, to Caleb's commanding officer, to my old boss. They sounded like the ravings of a lunatic. We intercepted these, my father said softly, to protect you. He told me that if I tried to leave, if I tried to take Noah, they would have to show these to the authorities. He said that with a history of instability, with no job, with no home of my own, the court would take Noah away from me instantly. He said they would place Noah in foster care until Caleb returned, if Caleb even wanted to stay married to a woman who had lost her mind. We are the only thing standing between you and losing your son, my mother said. She reached out and brushed a strand of hair from my face. Why do you fight us when we love you so much? I sat there, frozen. The fight drained out of me. I believed them. I believed that I was broken. I believed that the emails were real, that maybe I had written them in a blackout state I did not remember. I retreated to my room. I stopped asking for the car. I stopped asking for the bank statements. I accepted the bicycle. I accepted the allowance. But then, the formula ran out, and the money they gave me was not enough. And I looked at Noah, hungry and crying, and I realized that being a good, quiet daughter was going to hurt him. So I packed the bag, I put on my coat, I walked out into the snow, terrified that they would call the police, terrified that they would take him away. I did not know I was walking toward my grandfather. I just knew I was walking away from the lie. Now, sitting in the Lincoln, hearing Frank ask what they took, the answer felt heavy on my tongue. They took my money. They took my car. They took my pride. But mostly, they took my voice. They made me an extra in my own life, a ghost haunting their hallways. I looked at the back of Arthur's head. I looked at the passing streetlights. They have a file, I said to Frank, my voice steady for the first time. They have emails they said I wrote. They said I'm crazy. They said if I leave, I lose Noah. Frank did not look at me. He looked out the window at the gray skyline. We will see about that, he said, and for the first time in 6 months. I believed that maybe, just maybe, I was not the one who was going to lose everything. We arrived at my grandfather's estate, a sprawling property that felt less like a home and more like a fortress. The silence inside was absolute. It was not the tense, performative silence of my parents' house, where quiet meant someone was angry. This was the silence of heavy insulation, thick walls, and serious business. Frank led me directly into his study. He did not ask if I was hungry. He did not ask if I wanted a blanket. He pointed to a wingback chair upholstered in dark green leather. Sit, he said. I sat. Noah was still asleep in the carrier against my chest, the rhythm of the car ride having knocked him out completely. I unbuckled one side of the carrier to let him breathe better, but I did not take him off. I needed the weight of him. I needed the reminder of why I was here. Frank walked behind his desk. It was a massive slab of mahogany, completely clear of clutter except for a single landline phone and a notepad. He did not sit down. He stood there, looking at me, his hands resting on the back of his leather chair. We are going to do this once, Frank said. His voice was devoid of any grandfatherly warmth. It was the voice of a man who stripped assets from failing companies. I do not want your feelings. I do not want your interpretations of their motives. I do not want to hear that your mother means well or that your sister is just spirited. I want facts. If you do not know the answer, you say you do not know. Do you understand? I nodded. My throat felt dry. I understand. Who has the physical keys to the vehicle I purchased? Brielle, I said. She keeps them in her purse. The spare set is in my father's safe. Who is the registered owner on the title? I am, I said. Then I paused. At least, I was when you gave it to me. I signed the initial paperwork. Frank's eyes narrowed slightly. Have you signed any transfer of ownership documents since then? No. Have you signed a power of attorney giving your parents legal authority over your assets? No, I said. They asked me to once, right after Caleb deployed. They said it would be easier for them to handle the bills if I was indisposed. I told them I would think about it, but I never signed it. Frank leaned forward. You are certain no piece of paper where they told you it was just a formality? No insurance forms that seemed too long? I thought back. I remembered the flurry of papers they shoved at me when I first moved back in. Updated medical forms, house rules, liability waivers for the gated community. I do not think so, I said, my confidence wavering. I mean, I signed a lot of things, but nothing that said power of attorney at the top. Who has access to your bank accounts? My mother has my debit card, I said. She says she keeps it in the kitchen drawer, but I never see it. She says she uses it to buy the groceries and the baby supplies. Do you see the receipts? Sometimes, I said, but she usually throws them away before I can look closely. She tells me the total and the online access. I am locked out, I said. The password was changed. The recovery email was changed to my father's address. Frank remained still. Did you authorize that change? No. So, to summarize, Frank said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming dangerously quiet. You have a vehicle you do not drive. You have a bank account you cannot see. You have a debit card you do not hold. And you have never signed a legal document authorizing any of this. That is correct, I whispered. They said they were helping me manage my stress. Frank stared at me for a long time. The silence stretched out, taut as a wire. I expected him to lecture me on personal responsibility, I expected him to tell me I had been a fool to let it get this far. I was ready for the lecture. I deserved the lecture. But he did not lecture me. "Hazel," he said. I looked up. "They are not controlling you," he stated flatly. "They are committing a crime." The words hit me harder than the freezing wind outside had. Crime. Crime was something that happened to other people. Crime was robbers in ski masks. Crime was not your mother making smoothies or your sister borrowing your car. "It is not a crime," I protested weakly, the old programming kicking in. "It is just family stuff. It is messy. They are overbearing, yes, but they aren't criminals." Frank walked around the desk. He stopped 3 feet in front of me. He looked down, his expression grim. "If a stranger took your car keys and refused to give them back, what would you call it?" he asked. "Grand Theft Auto." I answered automatically. "If a stranger took your debit card and used it to buy themselves handbags, what would you call it?" "Theft. Fraud." "If a stranger intercepted your mail and changed your bank passwords, what is that?" "Identity theft." "Then why?" Frank asked. "Do the definitions change just because they share your DNA?" I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. He was right. The logic was irrefutable. I had been allowing them to do things that would have sent a stranger to prison. All because I was afraid of being a bad daughter. Frank turned back to his desk. He opened a drawer and pulled out a file. It was a thin manila folder. He tossed it onto the desk. It slid across the polished wood and stopped right in front of me. "Open it," he commanded. I shifted Noah slightly and reached out to open the folder. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It looked like a bank confirmation. I scanned the numbers. My eyes widened. It was an account statement for a trust. The beneficiary was Noah Monroe. The trustee was Hazel Gomez. The balance was significant. It was enough to put a down payment on a house. It was enough to live on for 2 years without working. "What is this?" I asked, my voice shaking. "I established that fund the day Noah was born." Frank said, "I wanted you to have a cushion. I wanted you to have independence. I did not want you to be dependent on a military salary or your parents' generosity." I stared at the date on the document. It was dated 5 months ago. "I never knew about this," I said. Nobody told me." "I know you didn't," Frank said. "Because I mailed the access documents, the checkbook, and the debit card for this account to your address of record, which is your parents' house." My stomach dropped. The room seemed to spin. "They intercepted it," I whispered. "Not just intercepted," Frank corrected. "The account has been accessed." I looked at the paper again. I saw the transaction history. There were withdrawals. Small ones at first, then larger ones. "How?" I asked. "How could they access it without me?" "That is the question," Frank said. "To access this account, they would need your signature. They would need to verify your identity. If they have done this, Hazel, they have not just stolen your mail, they have forged your signature on federal banking documents." I felt sick, physically sick. I thought about the times my mother had asked me to sign insurance forms while I was half asleep. I thought about the times Brielle had borrowed my driver's license to scan it for the file. "They stole from Noah," I said. The realization was a physical pain in my chest. "They didn't just take my money. They took the money you gave to my son." "Yes," Frank said, "and they used it to maintain the lifestyle they can no longer afford." He walked over to the phone. He picked up the receiver and dialed a number from memory. He did not look at the keypad. He looked at me while the line rang. "Pierce," Frank barked into the phone. "It is Callahan. I need you here tomorrow morning. 8 o'clock sharp. Bring Marla. Yes, it is the family matter we discussed. It is worse than I thought. Bring the full forensic kit. We are going to need to trace signatures and digital footprints." He hung up without saying goodbye. He looked at me. "Tomorrow morning. My attorney and my forensic accountant will be here. We are going to pull every record. We are going to trace every penny. We are going to find out exactly how they bypassed the security protocols." Panic flared in my chest. This was moving fast. Too fast. "Grandpa," I said, my voice rising in pitch. Wait, lawyers, forensic accountants. Are we talking about suing them? They are my parents. Brielle is my sister. If we do this, if we bring in the law, it destroys everything. They could go to jail. I was trembling. The idea of seeing my mother in handcuffs, no matter what she had done, felt wrong. It felt like a violation of the natural order. You do not send your parents to prison. You survive them. Frank walked over to the window. He looked out at the snowy grounds of his estate. Hazel, he said, without turning around. They did not hesitate to destroy you. They were systematically gaslighting you to make you think you were insane. They were preparing to take your child away from you to cover their tracks. Do you understand that if you had tried to leave on your own, they would have used your lack of funds and their fabricated evidence of your instability to take custody of Noah? He turned to face me. His face was hard as stone. Family is not a license to steal, he said. Family is not a shield they can hide behind while they cannibalize your life. I looked down at Noah. He was sleeping so peacefully. He had no idea that his grandmother had stolen his future to buy designer curtains. He had no idea that his aunt was driving his car to buy smoothies while he almost ran out of milk. If I did nothing, they would win. They would keep doing it. And eventually, they would succeed in taking him. They would paint me as the crazy, incompetent mother, and they would raise him to be just like them. I imagined Noah growing up in that house. I imagined him learning to lie like Brielle. I imagined him learning to manipulate like my mother. The fear in my chest vanished. It was replaced by a cold, steely resolve. It was the same resolve I saw in my grandfather's eyes. I took a deep breath. I sat up straighter in the leather chair. I adjusted the blanket around my son. Okay, I said. Frank watched me. Okay, what? He asked. We do it, I said. We do not just talk about it. We do not just threaten them. We do it. I looked Frank in the eye. Legally, I said. Fully, I want to know everything they took, and I want it back. Frank nodded once. It was a sharp, precise movement. Good, he said. Get some rest. Tomorrow, we go to war. The precinct smelled of stale coffee and floor wax, a sensory combination that usually signaled bad news. I sat on a hard plastic bench, Noah sleeping in his carrier beside me, while my grandfather stood at the front desk. The officer on duty, a man with tired eyes and a name tag that read Sergeant Miller, was shaking his head. Look, Mr. Callahan, Miller said, his voice carrying the weary tone of someone who had explained the same thing 5 times. I understand you are upset. But if the young lady gave her keys to her sister, and if her mother has her debit card, this is a civil matter. It is a domestic dispute. You need family court, not the police department. I felt the familiar shrink of defeat in my chest. This was exactly what I had feared. The law saw a family squabble, not a hostage situation. Frank did not raise his voice. He did not argue. He simply reached into his coat pocket and withdrew the document he had shown me the night before the statement for the trust fund I never knew existed. Sergeant, Frank said, sliding the paper across the high counter. My granddaughter did not give anyone access to this. This is a federally regulated trust. The access credentials were intercepted from the U.S. mail. The signature on the withdrawal request does not match hers. That is not a domestic dispute. That is felony fraud and mail theft. Sergeant Miller looked down at the paper. He adjusted his glasses. He read the balance. He read the withdrawal amounts. The weary look vanished from his eyes. He picked up a phone. Detective Vance, you are going to want to come out here. 10 minutes later, we were in a small, windowless interview room. Detective Vance was a woman in her 40s with a sharp bob cut and eyes that seemed to drill through excuses. She did not offer tea or sympathy. She sat down, opened a laptop, and looked at me. Start from the beginning, Vance said, and do not leave out the small stuff. If they took a postage stamp without your permission, I want to know. I told her. I told her about the car. I told her about the missing mail. I told her about the bank statements I was not allowed to see. At first, she just took notes. her face neutral. But when I got to the part about the trust fund, the account I had never authorized anyone to touch, her typing speed increased. "Did you sign a power of attorney?" Vance asked. Her eyes locked on mine. "No," I said. "Did you sign a signature card for this specific trust account at any bank branch?" "I did not even know it existed until yesterday," I replied. "So, if we pull the security footage from the bank branch where these withdrawals were made," Vance said, leaning forward, "we are not going to see you." "You will see my sister," I said. "Or my mother." Vance stopped typing. She looked at Frank. "If they moved more than $10,000, we are looking at grand larceny. If they use the internet to move it, it is wire fraud." The door to the interview room opened. I expected another officer. Instead, two people walked in who looked like they had just stepped out of a high-rise boardroom. "Marla Keene," the woman said. She was tall, wearing a charcoal suit that looked like it cost more than my parents' car. She did not smile. She extended a hand to the detective, then to me. Her grip was iron. "I am representing Mrs. Gomez in all civil and criminal matters related to this case." Behind her was a man who looked like a college professor, wearing a tweed jacket and round glasses. He was holding a briefcase that looked heavy. "Jonah Pierce," he said. His voice was flat, devoid of inflection. "Forensic accounting." Frank nodded to them. "You made good time." "We took the helicopter," Marla said, dismissing the travel logistics as if they were irrelevant. She sat down next to me, placing a legal pad on the table. She turned to Detective Vance. "Detective, we are prepared to file for immediate subpoenas for all bank records associated with the Gomez and Monroe families. We are also filing a formal complaint regarding identity theft." Vance looked at Marla, then at Jonah. The dynamic in the room shifted instantly. It was no longer a police inquiry. It was a war council. "I can take the complaint," Vance said, "but subpoenas take time." "We have time," Jonah said. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a laptop. "But the money might not." Based on the withdrawal patterns Frank described, they are liquidating assets. They are moving cash. Jonah turned the laptop screen toward the detective. He had a spreadsheet open. "I ran a preliminary credit check on Mrs. Gomez this morning," Jonah said. He spoke about my life as if it were a math problem. "Her credit score has dropped 150 points in 6 months. There are 4 credit cards opened in her name that she claims she did not authorize. There is also a personal loan for $20,000 taken out 3 months ago from an online lender." My jaw dropped. "A loan? I never took out a loan." "The funds were deposited into a joint account," Jonah continued, tapping a key, "then transferred immediately to an account held solely by Brielle Monroe." Detective Vance looked at the screen. Her professional detachment cracked. She looked angry. "That is identity theft," Vance said. "Clear cut." "It is more than that," Marla added, her voice sharp. "It is coercive control. They are using her identity to bankrupt her so she cannot leave. It is a form of entrapment." Vance looked at me. "Hazel, listen to me carefully. We can request an emergency freeze. We can flag your social security number and every account linked to it as compromised. It will lock everything down. No credit cards will work. No withdrawals will be allowed. It will stop the bleeding immediately." "Do it," I said. I did not hesitate. "You need to understand," Vance warned. "This will freeze them out too. If they try to buy groceries with a card in your name, it will be declined. If they try to put gas in the car, it will be declined. They will know immediately that something is wrong." "Good," I said. "Let them know." Jonah began typing rapidly. "I will coordinate with the fraud departments of the major bureaus. We will have a flag on the file within the hour." "Now," Vance said, pulling out a fresh form. "I need to talk about the car. You said the title is in your name." "Yes," I said. "And you have requested the return of the property." "Multiple times." "And they refused." "Yes." "That is unauthorized use of a motor vehicle," Vance said. "If we find that they forged a transfer of title, it becomes forgery of a government document. That is a felony." Jonah looked up from his screen. "If I may, Detective, I would suggest we also look for rental income. It is common in these types of financial abuse cases for the perpetrators to monetize the assets. If the sister has the car, check the peer-to-peer rental apps. Turo, Getaround. If she is renting out a car she does not own, she is committing fraud against the platform and the renters. Marla nodded. I will have my paralegals scrape the listings in the area. I sat there, stunned. For months, I had been told I was crazy. I had been told I was imagining things. Now, 3 experts were dissecting my life and finding crimes in every corner. Mrs. Gomez, Marla said, turning to me, we are going to need you to sign an affidavit stating that you did not authorize these accounts. Once you sign this, there is no going back. We are alleging that your parents and sister committed felonies. This is not a warning shot. This is an indictment. She slid a paper toward me. I looked at the pen. I thought about my mother making smoothies. I thought about my father's sad eyes. Then I thought about the text message Brielle sent me when I asked for money to buy diapers. Maybe if you were more responsible, you wouldn't be begging. I picked up the pen. Where do I sign? I asked. Marla pointed to the line. I signed my name. It was the first time in months I had signed something without a hand hovering over my shoulder. One more thing, Jonah said. He adjusted his glasses. If we find that they forged your signature on the tax returns, which is highly probable, if they are hiding income, the IRS will get involved. Federal prison time is mandatory for tax fraud. Let us cross that bridge when we get the transcripts, Marla said. Detective Vance stood up. I have enough to start. I'm going to open a formal investigation file. I will need to take the physical evidence, the letters you have, the trust documents. Frank handed over the folder. We will be in touch, Detective. Frank said. We walked out of the police station 2 hours later. The sun had come out, but the air was still biting cold. I buckled Noah into the car seat in the back of the Lincoln. I felt different. I felt lighter. For the first time in a long time, the fear that had been living in my stomach was gone. It had been replaced by something else. A sense of machinery moving, massive, heavy gears turning in my favor. I looked at the police station one last time. My family had spent 6 months building a cage for me out of lies and paper. They thought they were the wardens. They thought they held the keys. They did not realize that they had just locked themselves in a cage with the law, and the law, as represented by Marla Keene and Detective Vance, looked very hungry. The guest room in my grandfather's house was silent, a stark contrast to the chaos of my mind. For the first time in 6 months, Noah was sleeping in a proper crib, a solid oak structure Frank had ordered delivered that afternoon. The mattress was firm. The sheets were crisp, clean cotton. The room smelled of lavender and safety. I should have been sleeping. My body was screaming for rest. The adrenaline from the police station visit had faded, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion that made my limbs feel like lead. But I could not close my eyes. On the mahogany nightstand, my old phone sat on a white napkin. It was the only dirty thing in the pristine room. I had kept it turned on at Marla's instruction. She had told me that silence was our enemy. We needed them to speak. We needed them to show their hand. And they were showing it. The phone vibrated against the wood. It was a short, angry buzz that repeated every 30 seconds. Psst, psst, psst. I reached out and tapped the screen. The light flared in the darkness, stinging my eyes. The notifications were stacking up like bricks in a wall. 42 missed calls, 63 text messages. I opened the messaging app. I did not read them with fear anymore. I read them like a researcher studying a disease. The first few, sent around 5 in the afternoon when I had failed to return for dinner, were performative concern. Mom, Hazel, where are you? Dinner is on the table. Mom, please pick up. We are worried about the baby. Dad, this is not funny. Hazel, bring Noah home. It is too cold for a walk. Then, around 7 in the evening, the tone shifted. This was likely when they tried to use the credit card I had frozen, or perhaps when they realized the car was not coming back. The mask of the concerned parent slipped, revealing the predator beneath. Mom, Why is the card declined? I am at the store. This is embarrassing. Fix it, Dad. You have no right to do this. That is family money. You are stealing from us. Mom. Answer the phone. You are acting like a child. We have done everything for you. Then came Brielle. My sister's messages were different. They were not panicked. They were calculated. They were designed to hurt. Brielle. You think you are clever. Mom is crying. I hope you are happy. Brielle. I found your journal, the one where you wrote about feeling sad. Interesting reading. Brielle. If you do not come back by morning, I'm going to tell everyone about the time you dropped the bottle. I will tell them you threw it. People believe me. Hazel, they know you are unstable. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. That threat. Unstable. It was their favorite word. It was the leash they used to choke me. I took a screenshot. Do not reply. Marla had told me before she left that evening. Let them scream into the void. Every text is a piece of evidence. Every threat is a brick in the wall of the protective order we are building. Let them dig their own grave. I forwarded the screenshot to Marla's secure email. Bzzz. A new notification popped up. This one was not a text. It was a social media alert. My cousin, who lived 3 states away, had tagged me in a post. I hesitated. I knew I shouldn't look. I knew it would hurt. But I had to know what the narrative was. I opened the app. My mother had posted a photo. It was a picture of me from right after the birth, looking exhausted, pale, and disheveled. It was the worst photo she could have chosen. The caption read, "Please, we need prayers. Our sweet Hazel has left the house with baby Noah. She is confused and struggling with her mental health. She is not herself. If you see her, please do not approach her. Just call us immediately. We just want our grandbaby safe." The comments were already flooding in. Oh my God, how terrifying, praying for you. Postpartum psychosis is so real. I hope she doesn't hurt herself. Shared in the community group. We will keep an eye out. They were hunting me. They were weaponizing the community's goodwill to hunt me down like a fugitive. They weren't asking people to call the police. They were asking people to call them. They wanted to intercept me before the authorities got involved. I felt the walls of the room closing in. I felt that familiar panic, the sensation that no matter where I ran, they would find a way to paint me as the villain. Suddenly, the intercom system in the hallway chimed. It was a soft, melodic sound, but in the silence of the night, it sounded like a gunshot. I jumped out of bed. Grabbing my robe, I rushed into the hallway. Frank was already there. He was wearing a silk dressing gown, his silver hair perfectly combed even at 11 at night. He was standing in front of a panel of monitors mounted on the wall. "They are here," Frank said. His voice was devoid of surprise. I looked at the screens. The monitors showed the feed from the security cameras at the main gate, which was located a quarter-mile down the driveway. 3 cars were idling outside the iron gates. I recognized my parents' sedan. I recognized Brielle's convertible, or rather, the convertible she claimed was hers. And there was a 3rd car, my uncle's truck. They were staging a siege. "Turn on the audio," I whispered. Frank pressed a button. The sound of my mother's voice filled the hallway. She was not crying. She was screaming. "Open this gate. My daughter is in there. He has kidnapped my daughter." She was shaking the bars of the gate. It was a performance. She kept looking back at my uncle, who was holding his phone up, recording the whole thing. "Frank Callahan, you give me back my grandson," my father bellowed. He looked red in the face. "She is mentally incompetent. You are harboring a fugitive." Brielle was leaning against her car, typing furiously on her phone. She looked bored, until her father gestured to her, and then she immediately covered her face with her hands, feigning sobs for the camera. "They are recording it," I said, pointing at the screen. "They are going to post this. They are going to say you are holding me hostage." Frank looked at the screen with cold disdain. "Let them record." He turned to the head of his security detail, a man named Reynolds, who had appeared silently at the end of the hall. "Call the police," Frank ordered. Tell them we have trespassers attempting to breach the perimeter. Tell them the individuals are making threats and refusing to leave." "Already done, sir," Reynolds said. "ETA is 5 minutes. "Hazel," Frank said, turning to me, "I want you to record this too. From here, capture the monitors, capture their behavior. We need to show that they are not worried parents. They are aggressors." I pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking, but I forced them to still. I started recording the screen, on the monitor. My mother had escalated. She was now throwing rocks at the keypad of the gate. My father was kicking the metal bars. "I know you can hear me. Hazel," my mother screamed, her face distorted by the night vision camera into a ghostly mask. "You ungrateful little brat. After everything I bought for you, you think you can cut us off. You think you can take that money. That is my money. I earned it by putting up with you." I gasped. "Did you get that?" Frank asked. "Yes," I said. She had slipped. In her rage, she had forgotten the script. She wasn't screaming about Noah's safety. She was screaming about the money. "Keep recording," Frank said. 2 minutes later, blue and red lights washed over the scene on the monitor. 2 police cruisers pulled up behind my family's blockade. I watched as the transformation happened instantly. My mother stopped throwing rocks. She collapsed against the gate, sobbing theatrically. My father threw his hands up in a gesture of surrender, looking like a confused old man. I saw the officers step out. One of them was Sergeant Miller, the man we had seen at the desk earlier that day. My father rushed toward him. I could hear his voice through the audio feed, muffled but audible. "Thank God you are here. Officer, my father-in-law has locked my daughter in there. She is having a breakdown. We just want to get her to a hospital." Sergeant Miller did not look impressed. He held up a hand, stopping my father in his tracks. "Step back, sir," Miller said. "But my baby," my mother wailed. "Ma'am, step back," Miller ordered. "We have a report of trespassing and harassment." "Harassment?" my father sputtered. "We are family." Reynolds, Frank's security chief, spoke into a microphone that broadcast to the gate. "Officers, Mr. Callahan has requested that these individuals be removed from the property immediately. They have been issued a no trespassing notice via their legal counsel as of 2 hours ago." Marla had been busy, on the screen. I saw Miller talking to my father. My father was pointing at the house, waving his arms. Miller shook his head. He pointed to the cars. "You need to leave." Miller's voice came through clearly now. "The resident does not want you here. If you do not vacate the premises in 2 minutes, you will be arrested for criminal trespass and disturbing the peace." "You cannot do this," my mother screamed. "She has my grandson." "If you have a custody dispute, take it to court," Miller said, his patience visibly wearing thin. "Right now, you are banging on a private gate at 11:30 at night. Get in your cars, now." My mother looked at the gate one last time. Her eyes were not filled with love. They were filled with hate, pure, distilled malice. She looked directly at the camera lens, as if she knew I was watching. She mouthed something. There was no audio for a whisper, but I read her lips perfectly. "You are dead to me." Then she turned around, smoothed her coat, and got into the sedan. My father glared at the police, muttered something, and followed her. Brielle stopped filming, rolled her eyes, and got into the convertible. I watched the 3 cars make U-turns and drive away, followed by one of the police cruisers. The driveway was empty again. The silence returned. I lowered my phone. I saved the video. Frank placed a hand on my shoulder. It was heavy and warm. "Are you all right?" he asked. I looked at the empty screen where my family had been moments before. "They did not ask about Noah's formula," I said quietly. "They did not ask if he was sleeping. They did not ask if he was warm." I looked at Frank. "Mom screamed about the money," I said. "She said it was her money because she put up with me." "Yes," Frank said. "They do not want me back." I realized, the truth settling over me like a cold blanket. They do not miss me. They miss the control. They miss the access to the trust fund. They miss the rental income from the car. I had spent my whole life thinking I was loved. Even if that love was messy and controlling, I thought they were just overprotective. But tonight, outside that gate, I saw the truth. I was not a daughter to them. I was an asset. I was a credit score. I was a vehicle for a trust fund. And Noah was just the leverage they needed to keep the asset secured. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, but it was not from sadness. It was from relief. Because you cannot mourn a relationship that never truly existed. "They are not coming back tonight," Frank said. "Go to sleep. Hazel, you have a deposition in the morning." "I will," I said. I walked back to the guest room. I checked on Noah. He was still sleeping, his chest rising and falling in a peaceful rhythm. He had slept through the entire war outside the gate. I lay down on the bed. I did not turn off the phone. I kept it right next to my pillow. But this time, I wasn't afraid of it buzzing. Every text they sent, every lie they posted, every time they showed up at that gate, they were just handing me the keys to my freedom. Let them scream. I thought as I closed my eyes, I have everything on video. The next morning, the dining room table had been transformed into a command center. The smell of breakfast bacon, eggs, and freshly brewed coffee was overpowered by the scent of warm printer ink and ozone. Jonah Pierce sat at the head of the table, surrounded by 3 laptops and a stack of paper that looked like a skyscraper made of trees. Marla Keene was pacing by the window, a Bluetooth headset in her ear, barking orders in a low, dangerous murmur. My grandfather, Frank, sat opposite Jonah, drinking tea with the stillness of a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. I walked in with Noah on my hip. I felt small again, but not the scared kind of small. I felt like I was standing at the base of a mountain I had to climb, and for the first time, I could see just how high the peak was. "Sit down, Hazel," Frank said. He did not look up from the document he was reading. "Jonah has found the leak." Jonah pushed his glasses up his nose. He did not offer a morning pleasantry. He simply spun his laptop around so I could see the screen. It was a spreadsheet, color-coded in red and black. The red section was massive. "I have consolidated the transaction histories from the 4 major banks we subpoenaed this morning," Jonah began, his voice dry and factual. "The total misappropriation of funds is significantly higher than our initial estimate of $50,000. I swallowed hard. "How much?" $142,680.12, Jonah said. The number hung in the air. I felt my knees go weak. I pulled out a chair and sat down before I fell down. "That is impossible," I whispered. "I did not have that much. Even with the trust fund, how—" "They did not just drain your liquid cash," Jonah explained, tapping a key to expand a section of the chart. "They leveraged your credit profile. You see, Hazel, theft is usually simple. You take money, you run. This was an ecosystem." He pointed to a column labeled Outflows. "We found transfers to third-party contractors," Jonah said. "A roofing company, a landscape architect, an interior design firm specializing in high-end kitchen remodels." I stared at the names of the companies. "The kitchen," I realized, a wave of nausea rolling over me. My mother had the kitchen redone 3 months ago. She told me my father got a bonus. She said they were doing it to make the house nicer for Noah. "They paid for it with a home improvement loan," Jonah said. "A loan taken out in your name, using your social security number, electronically signed from an IP address located inside their house." "But it gets worse," Marla said, hanging up her call and joining us at the table. She looked angry. "Show her the credit cards, Jonah." Jonah brought up a new window. It showed statements for 3 different credit cards. I recognized none of them. "They opened these cards 6 months ago," Jonah said. "Amex, Chase, Citibank, they maxed them out almost immediately. Designer handbags, first-class flights to Miami, spa treatments, jewelry." He scrolled down. "But here's the sophisticated part. They did not just default on the debt. They used the money from Noah's trust fund, the cash withdrawals Frank identified, to make the minimum payments on these cards." I blinked, trying to understand the mechanics of the betrayal. "They were using my son's money to pay off the debt they created in my name," I said slowly. "Correct. Jonah said. It is a cycle. They steal your credit to buy luxury goods. Then they steal your cash to keep the credit score high enough to open more cards. It is a parasite feeding on itself. And there is one more thing in this category. He pointed to a recurring payment of $600 a month. This is a student loan payment, Jonah said. But according to your file, you paid off your student loans 3 years ago. I leaned in. I did. I have the letter framed. This is not your loan, Jonah said. This is a loan consolidation for Brielle Monroe. It was transferred to a balance transfer card opened in your name. You are currently paying off your sister's college degree. I felt the blood drain from my face. I remembered Brielle making fun of my cheap clothes. I remembered her telling me I needed to learn how to budget. All the while, I was paying for her education. They stripped you for parts, Frank said, his voice low and rumbling. They treated you like a carcass. There is more, Marla said. The car. I looked up. What about it? Did they sell it? No, Marla said. Selling it would be a one-time profit. Your family prefers recurring revenue. She slid a tablet across the table. It was open to a web page for a peer-to-peer car rental service, similar to Airbnb, but for vehicles. There, in high definition, was my white SUV. The profile belonged to Brielle M. The listing described the car as a luxury family cruiser, perfect for weekend getaways. It had over 40 reviews. She has been renting it out, I gasped. Strangers. Strangers have been driving my car. Short-term rentals, Jonah clarified. According to the platform's data, which Marla's team scraped this morning, this vehicle has been rented out for 22 weekends in the last 6 months. At $150 a day, that is nearly $7,000 in income, Marla calculated. Income that went directly to Brielle's personal account. Meanwhile, you were paying the insurance premiums, and you were the one walking in the snow. I stared at the photo of the car. In one of the pictures, I could see my own baby car seat base in the back. They hadn't even taken it out. They were renting out my son's safety equipment to strangers. How is this possible? I asked, my voice trembling with rage. The app requires proof of ownership. You have to upload the registration and insurance. That is where the DMV comes in, Marla said. She opened a thick folder. I had a contact at the Department of Motor Vehicles pull the jacket on this VIN number first thing this morning. She pulled out a photocopy of a document. It was a transfer of title form. According to the state of Pennsylvania, you sold the car to Brielle Monroe 4 months ago, Marla said, for the sale price of $1. I looked at the signature at the bottom. It was my name. It was written in blue ink. It had the loops and swirls of my handwriting. I never signed this, I said. I swear, I never signed a title. We know, Frank said. Think back. Hazel, Marla said, her eyes intense. 4 months ago, that would be October. Did you sign anything unusual, anything they told you was routine? I closed my eyes. I tried to navigate the fog of sleep deprivation that had clouded those first few months. October, Noah had a fever. I was up for 3 nights straight. My mother, I whispered. The memory surfaced like a piece of driftwood. She came into my room. I was nursing Noah. I was barely awake. She said the insurance company needed a postpartum coverage update. She said it was to make sure Noah was covered if anything happened to me on the road. She had a stack of papers. She just lifted the corners and told me where to initial. The old sign here shuffle, Marla said with disgust. Classic. I signed a blank page. I realized. I remember now. The text was covered by the other papers. I just signed the line she pointed to. And that signature was lifted or applied to this title transfer, Jonah said. Or they just practiced enough to forge it freehand on the day. But here's the problem for them. Jonah pointed to the signature on the screen. I ran this against your signature from your marriage license and your driver's license. The pressure points are off. The upstroke on the H is too slow. This was written by someone trying to draw your name, not write it. It is a forgery. A good one, but a forgery. But the DMV accepted it, I said. So legally, she owns the car. The DMV is a bureaucracy, not a detective agency, Frank said. He leaned forward, a grim smile playing on his lips. But they made a fatal error. They forgot who bought the car. Frank tapped the table with a single finger. When I buy a vehicle for a family member, Frank said, I do not just write a check. I have my lawyers structure the purchase. I am listed on the original dealer paperwork as a lien holder. Even though the car is paid off, it is a security measure I use for all my assets. It prevents the asset from being sold or transferred without my release of interest. My eyes widened. So, Marla finished for him. For that title transfer to be valid, it needed 2 signatures, yours, as the owner, and Frank's, as the lien holder. She pointed to the document again. There was a line for the lien holder. It was blank. The clerk at the DMV made a mistake processing it, Marla said. They missed the lien, or more likely, Brielle went to a shady tag agency that did not look too closely. But legally, that transfer is void. The car still belongs to you, and Brielle has been engaging in theft by conversion and fraud every time she rented it out. We have them, I said. The realization was electric. We really have them. We have them on fraud. We have them on forgery. We have them on grand larceny, Jonah listed off. And since they use the internet to manage the credit cards and the rental app, we have them on wire fraud. That is 20 years in federal prison. Hazel, per count. I looked at the papers spread out on the table. It was a map of my destruction. Every dollar they took was a choice. Every time they swiped that card, they chose a handbag over my well-being. Every time they rented that car, they chose profit over my safety. The money from the trust, I said quietly. The money Grandpa gave for Noah. What did they spend that specific money on? Jonah hesitated. He looked at Frank. Frank nodded. The withdrawals from the trust account match the dates of the payments for a vacation, Jonah said. A 10-day cruise to the Mediterranean for your parents. They went in November. Did they not? Yes, I said. They told me it was a business trip for my dad. They said the company paid for it. The trust paid for it, Jonah corrected. They drank champagne on a balcony in Italy using the money intended for your son's college education. I felt a tear, hot and angry, slide down my cheek. And when they came back, I said, my voice shaking, they brought me a t-shirt, and they told me I was ungrateful because I didn't say thank you enthusiastically enough. I stood up. I walked over to the window. I looked out at the snow. They ate his future, I said. They literally ate my son's future and called me a burden. And now they are going to choke on it, Frank said. He stood up and walked over to me. Marla is filing the affidavit for the car seizure this afternoon, Frank said. We are sending a tow truck to the rental location it is currently parked at the airport. According to the GPS tracker Jonah activated, we are taking it back today. And the credit cards? I asked. Frozen, Jonah said. I spoke to the fraud departments an hour ago. The next time your mother tries to buy a latte, or your father tries to pay that contractor, the card will decline, and the bank will confiscate it. This is the end of the montage. Hazel, Marla said, closing her folder with a snap. We have the data. We have the proof. The investigation is over. Now, the prosecution begins. I turned back to them. I looked at the evidence of my family's greed. Do it, I said. Take the car, freeze the accounts, and make sure they know exactly why it is happening. Oh, they will know, Frank said darkly, because Marla is serving them with the civil lawsuit for damages at the same time the police serve the warrant for the car. I looked at Noah, playing happily with a rattle in his playpen in the corner. He was safe. He was going to have a future. And the people who tried to steal it were about to learn that you cannot steal from a mother and expect to get away with it. Let's get my car back, I said. Marla Keene stood by the fireplace in my grandfather's study, tapping a manicured fingernail against the screen of her tablet. The investigation phase was over. We had the data. We had the evidence. Now, we had to secure the perimeter. They know they have lost control of the assets, Marla said, her voice sharp and pragmatic. The credit cards are declining. The car is gone. The bank accounts are frozen. When a narcissist loses control of the victim, they try to destroy the victim's support network. In your case, that is Caleb. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. They will call him. They have likely already called him, Marla corrected. They will spin a narrative. They will say you have suffered a psychotic break. They will say you have kidnapped Noah and are endangering him. They will try to get Caleb to sign over temporary custody or power of attorney to them for the safety of the child. If Caleb believes them, he could legally demand you return Noah to their house. He won't believe them, I said, but my voice lacked conviction. Caleb was 5,000 miles away. He was tired, stressed, and living in a shipping container. He had not seen me in 6 months. All he knew of my life was what I had told him during brief. Laggy video calls where my mother had hovered in the background, forcing me to smile and say everything was fine. Do not leave it to chance, Frank said from his desk. Call him, now, and do not appeal to his emotions. Appeal to his logic. Soldiers respect intelligence. Give him the intel. I nodded. I picked up my laptop and walked to the guest room. I needed privacy for this. I sat on the edge of the bed. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I opened the secure video calling app the military used. I saw the green dot next to his name. He was online. I took a deep breath. I told myself I was not the scared girl who walked in the snow. I was the woman who had just frozen her parents' assets. I clicked the call button. The screen was black for a moment. Then it flickered into a pixelated image of my husband. Caleb looked exhausted. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his hair was cut shorter than I remembered. He was wearing his tan t-shirt, sitting on a cot in a dim room. Hazel, he said. There was no smile. There was no, hey, beautiful. His voice was guarded, hesitant. Hi, Caleb, I said. He rubbed his face with a calloused hand. I am glad you called. I just got off the phone with your mom. My stomach dropped. What did she say? Caleb looked away from the camera. She was crying. Hazel. She said you took Noah and ran off to your grandfather's house in the middle of the night. She said you were screaming at them. She said you have been acting erratic for weeks, that you are spending money we do not have, that you aren't feeding the baby. He looked back at me, his eyes pleading. She said I need to sign a paper to let them bring Noah back to the house so they can watch him while you get help. Hazel, tell me what is going on. Are you okay? The accusation was there, wrapped in concern. He was scared. He was scared that the woman he married had broken. I wanted to cry. I wanted to scream that they were liars. I wanted to beg him to love me. But I remembered Frank's voice. Facts. Intel. I am not erratic. Caleb, I said. My voice was calm. It was the calmest I had ever sounded. And I am not spending money we do not have. I am not spending any money because they took it all. What do you mean? Caleb asked, frowning. Your mom said, I am going to share my screen with you. I interrupted. I do not want you to listen to me. I want you to look. I clicked the button to share my desktop. This is the bank statement for the savings account, I said. Look at the withdrawals. I highlighted the lines. $500 to a liquor store, $2,000 to a travel agency, $300 to a high-end nail salon. Caleb, look at the dates. I was home with a newborn. I was not flying to Miami. Caleb leaned closer to his screen. I could see his eyes scanning the numbers. Now look at this, I said. I opened the file for the credit cards. They opened 3 credit cards in my name, I said. This is the statement for the American Express. Look at the balance, $20,000. And look here. I pointed to the payment history. They were paying the minimum balance using transfers from a trust fund my grandfather set up for Noah. A trust fund I did not know existed until 2 days ago because they stole the mail. A trust fund? Caleb asked. What are you talking about? Grandpa Frank gave Noah $50,000, I said. It is almost gone. They spent it on a kitchen remodel and a cruise. Caleb was silent. The frown on his face was deepening, shifting from confusion to something darker. But the car, Caleb said. Brielle said she was just keeping the battery running for you. She said you refused to drive. Here is the listing on the rental app, I said, pulling up the webpage. She has been renting it to strangers for $150 a day. She made $7,000. Caleb, I was walking to the pharmacy in the snow because I did not have gas money, and she was renting our car to tourists. I saw Caleb's jaw tighten. The muscle in his cheek jumped. And finally, I said, I want you to see this. I played the video file from the security gate. The video of my mother screaming. The video of her throwing rocks. The video where she yelled, "That is my money. I earned it by putting up with you." The audio was crisp. Her malice was undeniable. It was not the voice of a worried grandmother. It was the voice of a woman who had lost her wallet. I stopped the video. I ended the screen share. I looked back at Caleb. He was sitting perfectly still. He looked like he had been punched in the gut. I am at Grandpa Frank's, I said softly. We have a lawyer. We have a forensic accountant. We have filed police reports for identity theft, fraud, and forgery. I am not having a breakdown. Caleb, I am escaping a crime scene. The silence stretched between us for 10 seconds. It felt like an hour. Then, Caleb let out a long, slow breath. He looked at me. The guard was down. The hesitation was gone. I believe you, he said. 3 words. They were the most beautiful words I had ever heard. I believe you, he repeated, his voice gaining strength. God, Hazel, I am so sorry. They told you I was crazy, I said, feeling the tears finally prick at the corners of my eyes. They wanted you to think I was unfit. They sent me a message right before you called, Caleb admitted. Your dad. He sent me a draft of a document. He wanted me to grant them temporary guardianship of Noah. He said if I did not do it, social services would take him because you were homeless. I am not homeless, I said. I am safe. Caleb looked down at his hands. He looked furious, not at me, at himself. I should have known, he muttered. I saw the money leaving the account, the little bits here and there. Your mom told me you were buying things for the nursery. I thought you were just nesting. I didn't want to stress you out by asking. Wait, I said. What money? The allotment, Caleb said. The family separation allowance and the extra housing stipend. I froze. What allowance? Caleb looked up, confused. The military pays an extra $250 a month when we are separated, plus the adjustment for the housing. I set it up to deposit into the joint account before I left. It is nearly $800 a month extra. Hazel. I sent it so you could get a nanny or help with the house. My mouth fell open. I never saw it, I whispered. I never saw a dime of it. They told me your pay was barely covering the grocery bill. $800 a month, Caleb said, his voice rising. For 6 months, that is almost $5,000. They took that too. They took everything. Caleb. I saw the realization hit him. It wasn't just money. It was his effort. He was working 12-hour shifts in the desert, sweating and bleeding, sending money home to take care of his wife and son, and his in-laws had intercepted it, spent it on themselves, and then told him his wife was incompetent. They made me think you were struggling, Caleb said, his voice trembling with rage. They made me think you couldn't handle the finances. I was sitting here worrying about you, thinking I needed to protect you from yourself, but I needed to protect you from them. They stole my reputation, I said. They stole your trust in me. No, Caleb said firmly. They didn't steal it. They just obscured it, and now I see it. He reached for something off camera. He pulled out a notebook. I am going to the JAG officer on base immediately, Caleb said. I am revoking any and all permissions your parents might claim to have. I am going to draft a sworn statement confirming that I support your location, your custody of Noah, and your control of our assets. I will have it notarized and emailed to your lawyer within the hour. Thank you, I said. Do not thank me, Caleb said. I left you there. I left you in the viper's nest. I should have seen it. Your mom, she was always so nice to me. I thought she was a saint. She is a very good actress, I said. Not good enough, Caleb said. Not anymore. He looked at me through the screen. His eyes were fierce. This was the soldier I had married. This was the man who protected things. Hazel, he said, do not let them near Noah. Do not let them near you. If they show up, you call the police. You tell Frank to burn them down. We are, I said. We froze the accounts today. They are panicked. Good, Caleb said. I want them panicked. I want them to feel exactly as helpless as they made you feel. He checked his watch. I have to go. I have to get this paperwork filed before the legal office closes. But Hazel. Yes. I love you. You are the strongest person I know. You walked through snow with our son to save him. You are a hero. I choked back a sob. I just wanted milk. You got more than milk, Caleb said. You got our life back. I will call you as soon as the papers are signed. The screen went black. I sat there for a long time, staring at the reflection of my own face in the dark monitor. For months, the hardest part hadn't been the poverty. It hadn't been the hunger. It had been the loneliness. The feeling that my husband, my partner, was slipping away from me, pulled into the undertow of my family's lies. I had been terrified that I had lost him, that they had successfully rewritten me in his mind as a broken, crazy woman. But the truth, raw and documented, had cut through the noise. I closed the laptop. I stood up. I was not just fighting for money anymore. I was not just fighting for a car. My parents had tried to widow me while my husband was still alive. They had tried to orphan my son while his mother was holding him. I walked out of the guest room and back into the study. Marla and Frank looked up. Well, Frank asked. He knows, I said. He knows about the allowance they stole. He knows about the lies. He is with us. Frank nodded slowly. Good. That closes the last exit door. He is going to JAG, I said. He is sending a notarized statement of support. Marla smiled. It was a terrifying, shark-like smile. Excellent, she said. That statement will be the nail in the coffin for their grandparents' rights argument. Now, we don't just have a plaintiff. We have a coalition. I picked up Noah from his playpen. He cooed and grabbed my finger. My family, my real family, the one that mattered, was intact. Caleb, Noah, and me, and standing guard around us were Frank Callahan and the law of the United States. What is next? I asked. Marla pulled a fresh stack of documents from her briefcase. Next, she said, we invite them to talk, but we do it on our terms, and we set a trap they won't even see coming. The offensive began at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday morning, and it started with paper. Marla Keene did not believe in warning shots. She believed in overwhelming force. While I was feeding Noah his breakfast, Marla was electronically filing a civil complaint that was thick enough to be a novel. We were suing my parents and Brielle for conversion, unjust enrichment, fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. We were asking for the return of all misappropriated funds, the $142,000 Jonah had tracked. We were asking for treble damages, which meant we wanted 3 times the amount they stole as a penalty, and we were asking for them to pay every single cent of Marla's billable hours. Simultaneously, Marla filed a request for a temporary restraining order. We attached the screenshots of the threatening text messages. We attached the video of my mother screaming at the gate. We attached the police report from the night of the siege. The judge will sign the restraining order by lunch, Marla told me, snapping her briefcase shut. But we are not going to serve them with it just yet. I looked up, confused. I thought the point was to keep them away. It is, Frank said. He was standing by the window, watching the snow fall. But if we serve them now, they will lawyer up immediately. They will clam up. We need them to talk one last time. Frank turned to me. His expression was the one he wore when he was playing chess, a game he had tried to teach me as a child, but which I lacked the killer instinct for. We are going to invite them to a settlement conference, Frank said. We will tell them that we want to resolve this family misunderstanding without further police involvement. We will tell them that if they come to the table today, we can discuss unfreezing the accounts. They will come, I said. They are desperate. Brielle texted me 4 times this morning asking for gas money. Exactly, Frank said. They are hungry, and hungry people make mistakes. But it is a trap, I whispered. It is a deposition, Marla corrected, a shark-like grin spreading across her face. They just won't know it until it is too late. The meeting was set for 2 in the afternoon. We did not hold it in the warm, comfortable living room. Frank had his staff set up the formal dining room. The long mahogany table was stripped of its decorative runners. In the corner, a woman named Janice sat with a stenography machine. We told the family she was just a secretary taking notes for the agreement. Technically, she was a court reporter, and the notes she was taking would be a sworn legal record. I sat on one side of the table, flanked by Frank and Marla. My hands were folded on the table to hide that they were shaking. I was terrified to see them. Even with the truth on my side, the conditioning of 30 years is hard to break. I felt that old urge to apologize, to smooth things over, to be the good girl. Remember, Marla whispered to me as we heard their car pull up, you are not their daughter today. You are the plaintiff. Do not speak unless I tell you to. Let them fill the silence. The doors opened. My parents and Brielle walked in. They looked different than they had 2 days ago. My mother's hair, usually perfectly blown out, was pulled back in a severe, messy bun. She was wearing a coat that looked expensive, but had a stain on the lapel. My father looked gray and tired. His posture slumped. Brielle looked furious. She was wearing sunglasses indoors, clutching her phone like a weapon. They stopped when they saw the setup. They saw Frank. They saw Marla. They saw the woman in the corner. What is this? My father asked, his voice rough. I thought this was a family talk. It is, Frank said calmly. Sit down, Robert. We do not need all these people, my mother said, her eyes darting to Marla. Hazel, honey, tell them to leave. We just want to talk to you. We want to hug you. She took a step toward me, arms open. Sit down, Marla barked. It was not a request. It was a command that cracked through the room like a whip. My mother flinched. She looked at me, waiting for me to defend her. I stayed silent. I stared at a knot in the wood of the table. Slowly, they pulled out the chairs and sat. We are here to discuss the terms of the separation, Marla began. My client, Mrs. Gomez, is willing to forego pressing immediate criminal charges regarding the vehicle theft, provided certain conditions are met. We didn't steal the car, Brielle snapped. I was borrowing it. We are family. We can debate definitions later, Marla said breezily. Here is the offer. You return the vehicle keys immediately. You sign a document admitting that the transfer of title was fraudulent. You agree to a repayment plan for the $140,000 taken from the accounts. In exchange, Hazel does not send the police to your house tonight. My father laughed. It was a dry, bitter sound. You think you can dictate terms to us, he said. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded document. We have our own terms. He slid the paper across the table toward me. We know you are struggling. Hazel, my father said, his voice dropping into that fake, concerned baritone that used to make me feel so safe. We know you are confused. We have spoken to a doctor. He agrees that your behavior running away, stealing the baby, cutting off your family shows signs of severe postpartum instability. I looked at the paper. It was a legal document titled Voluntary Guardianship and Mental Health Directive. Sign this, my mother said softly. It just says that you agree to let us take care of Noah for 6 months while you get treatment. It authorizes us to handle your finances so you don't have to worry about bills. You sign this, and we will give you the car keys back. We will forget about the money you wasted. We will just be a family again. I read the text. It was a confession. It required me to admit that I was unable to care for my child and suffering from delusions. If I signed this, they would own me. They would have legal proof that I was unfit. They could take Noah. They could take the trust fund. They could take everything. I looked up. I looked at my mother's eyes. There was no love there. There was only calculation. She was trading my son for a set of car keys. You want me to say I am crazy, I said. My voice was steady. In exchange for my own car. We want you to get help, my mother said. And yes, we need to know you are not going to drive that car into a ditch. Brielle has been taking such good care of it. Taking care of it? I asked. I looked at Brielle. Is that what you call it? I keep it washed, Brielle said, crossing her arms. I keep the maintenance up. You would have let it rot in the driveway. And the miles? Marla asked, interjecting smoothly. The car has put on 12,000 miles in 6 months. That is a lot of driving for a spin class. I drive a lot, Brielle said defensively. You rent it a lot, I said. The room went silent. Brielle froze. I don't know what you are talking about, she said, but her voice pitched up. We have the Turo logs. Brielle, Marla said. We have the bank transfers. We know you made $7,000 renting out a car that does not belong to you. Brielle's face turned red. She slammed her hand on the table. So what? She shouted. It was sitting there. It was a waste of an asset. I was being smart. That car makes money. Okay, it pays for itself. Why shouldn't I get a cut for managing it? Hazel was just sitting in her room crying while I was out there hustling. Click, I heard the soft tap of the stenographer's keys. Marla smiled. It was a tiny, terrifying smile. So you admit, Marla said, that you were using the vehicle for commercial purposes without the owner's consent. You admit you generated revenue from an asset that was not yours. I admit I am smarter than her, Brielle yelled. I admit I used it. It is a family car. Thank you, Marla said. That is admission of unauthorized use and theft by conversion. We have that on record. My father realized what was happening. He saw the stenographer typing. He saw the red light on the digital recorder sitting in the center of the table. Be quiet, Brielle, he hissed. He turned to me. The mask of the concerned father fell away completely. His face twisted into a snarl. Listen to me. Hazel, he said. You think you are clever with your lawyers. You are nothing. You are a broke, unemployed housewife. If you do not sign that paper, if you do not come home today, we are going to sue you for full custody of Noah. On what grounds? Frank asked, leaning back in his chair. Neglect, my father shouted. She dragged an infant through a snowstorm. She is homeless. She has no income. We have money. We have a home. No judge in this state will give a baby to a woman living out of a suitcase who thinks her family is robbing her. We will paint you as a paranoid lunatic. Hazel, we will bring in witnesses. We will drag this out until you are bankrupt and broken. You will never see your son again. My mother nodded, her eyes cold. We will do it. Hazel, don't test us. We know what is best for Noah. I felt the blood drain from my face. It was my worst nightmare spoken aloud. But then I looked at Marla. She was not scared. She looked like she had just been handed a winning lottery ticket. Marla stood up. She picked up the document they had tried to make me sign, the one admitting I was unstable. She held it up. Let the record show, Marla said, her voice clear and loud for the microphone, that Robert and Angela Monroe have just threatened to file a frivolous custody lawsuit based on knowingly false claims of neglect, solely for the purpose of coercing my client into signing a fraudulent financial document. My father blinked. What? That is extortion, Robert, Frank said. In the state of Pennsylvania, threatening to report someone to authorities or to file a lawsuit to obtain property or financial gain is a felony. It is called theft by extortion. We are negotiating, my father stammered. No, Marla said. Negotiating is discussing numbers. What you just did, that was blackmail. You just told a mother that if she does not give you her property and forgive your debt, you will use the court system to take her child. Marla turned to the stenographer. Janice, did you get that verbatim? Every word, Ms. Keene, Janice said. And the audio, clear as a bell. My mother looked around the room. She looked at the stenographer. She looked at the recorder. She realized, finally, that this was not a dining room. It was a courtroom, and she had just confessed. "You set us up," my mother whispered. "I invited you to talk," Frank said. "You chose to threaten." Marla opened her briefcase. She pulled out a stack of papers. These were the papers she had prepared that morning. "Since you are already here," Marla said, sliding the heavy stack across the table, "consider yourselves served." "What is this?" my father asked, staring at the thick bundle. "That is the civil lawsuit," Marla said, "and buried in there is the temporary restraining order signed by Judge Holloway an hour ago. You are now legally required to stay 500 feet away from Hazel, Noah, and this property, which means, technically, you are currently violating a court order." Marla checked her watch. "I will give you 3 minutes to leave before I call the sheriff to enforce the order." My father stood up so fast his chair tipped over. He looked at the papers. He looked at me. His face was purple with rage, but beneath the rage was terror. He knew he had walked into a bear trap. "You are making a mistake. Hazel," he spat. "You are going to need us one day, and we won't be there." "That is the plan," I said. I looked him in the eye. "I don't need you," I said. "I need my money. I need my car, and I need you to leave." "Let's go," my mother said, grabbing Brielle's arm. Brielle was staring at me, her mouth open, her sunglasses askew. "But my income," Brielle muttered. "The rental." "Move," my father shouted. They scrambled out of the room. The heavy doors slammed shut behind them, leaving a ringing silence in their wake. I let out a breath that felt like it had been stuck in my chest for 20 years. My hands were still shaking, but not from fear, from the adrenaline of the kill. Frank picked up his teacup. He took a sip. "Well," he said, "that went better than expected." Marla turned to the stenographer. "Janice, I want that transcript expedited. I want a certified copy on my desk by tomorrow morning." "You got it," Janice said. "Why was that better?" I asked. "They threatened to take Noah." "They threatened him," Marla said. "But in doing so, they gave us the ultimate shield. A judge will never grant them custody now. We have them on tape admitting that the custody suit would be a weapon, not a necessity. They admitted they were using Noah as leverage." "And Brielle admitted the fraud," Jonah said, stepping out from the side room where he had been listening. "She admitted the car was an asset she was monetizing. That destroys her claim that she was just holding the keys for you." "They walked in here thinking they were wolves," Frank said, a small, satisfied smile playing on his lips. "They didn't realize they were walking into a taxidermy shop." I looked at the empty chairs where my parents had sat. I looked at the paper they wanted me to sign, the one that would have labeled me broken. I reached out, picked up the paper, and tore it in half. "They really thought I would sign it," I said softly. "They really thought I was that weak." "They were looking for the girl they raised," Frank said. "They did not expect to meet the woman you have become." I stood up. I felt taller. I felt solid. "Marla," I said, "add the extortion count to the lawsuit." "Already typing it," she said. "And make sure the police get a copy of the transcript," I added. "I want Detective Vance to hear my father threaten to kidnap my son." "Consider it done," Marla said. I walked to the window and watched their cars speed away down the long driveway. They were driving fast, reckless, running from the ruin they had brought upon themselves. They had left in a fury, screaming and threatening, but they had left behind something much more valuable than their pride. They had left me the truth, recorded and notarized, and with that truth, I was going to bury them. The courtroom was quiet, but it was the kind of quiet that exists right before a structural collapse. The air conditioning hummed with a low mechanical drone that did nothing to cool the heat rising from the defense table. I sat next to Marla Keene, on the other side of the aisle. My parents and Brielle sat with their attorney, a man named Mr. Sterling, who had a smile that looked like it had been bought from a catalog. They were dressed in muted colors, navy blue, charcoal, beige. My mother was wearing a pearl necklace I had never seen before. She looked the picture of the grieving. worried grandmother. My father looked stoic, the weary patriarch dealing with a rebellious child. They were still playing the role. They were banking on the idea that the law would see a family tragedy, not a crime ring. Judge Holloway, a woman with reading glasses perched on the end of her nose and a gaze that could cut glass, banged her gavel. "We are back on the record," she said. "Mr. Sterling, you may proceed with your opening statement." Sterling stood up. He buttoned his suit jacket with a flourish. He walked toward the jury box, though this was a bench trial. He still performed for the audience. "Your Honor," Sterling began, his voice dripping with honeyed sympathy, "this is not a case of fraud. This is a case of love. Misguided, perhaps, but love nonetheless. My clients, Robert and Angela Monroe, took their daughter in when she was vulnerable. Her husband was deployed. She was a new mother. She was struggling with severe postpartum emotions. She was forgetful. She was erratic." He turned to look at me. His eyes were not kind. They managed her finances because she could not. They drove her car because she was too terrified to get behind the wheel. Everything they did, every transfer, every decision was to ensure that she and her baby had a roof over their heads. And how does she repay them? With lawsuits, with accusations, with a smear campaign orchestrated by her estranged grandfather. My mother dabbed her eyes with a tissue. It was a perfect performance. Marla did not look up from her notepad. She simply wrote one word, "Showtime." "Call your first witness," Judge Holloway said, sounding bored by the theatrics. "I call the plaintiff, Hazel Gomez," Marla said. Standing up, I walked to the stand. I felt the eyes of my family burning into my back. I placed my hand on the Bible. I swore to tell the truth. Sterling wasted no time on cross-examination. He wanted to break me early. He wanted the crying, shaking girl from the snowstorm. "Mrs. Gomez," Sterling said, leaning on the podium, "is it true that in the months following your son's birth, you often forgot to pay bills?" "I never saw the bills," I said clearly. "But you were emotional, were you not?" Sterling pressed. "You cried frequently. You had trouble sleeping. You were, to use a common term, unstable." I looked at him. Then I looked at my parents. My father was nodding slightly, encouraging the narrative. "I was sleep-deprived," I said. I was a single parent in practice because my husband was serving his country. I was anxious, but I was not unstable." "Then why did your parents have to take your keys?" Sterling asked. "Why did they have to handle your debit card?" I leaned into the microphone. I did not raise my voice. I did not let a single tremor enter my tone. "They did not have to," I said. "They chose to. They told me I was sick, so they could cure me with my own money. They isolated me. They cut off my phone. They intercepted my mail. I wasn't unstable. Mr. Sterling, I was controlled." Sterling paused. He didn't like that answer. "Controlled?" he scoffed. "You are a grown woman. You could have walked out the door." "I did," I said. "I walked out into a snowstorm with a 5-pound baby because they had spent my money on a cruise and I couldn't afford milk." A ripple of murmuring went through the courtroom. Judge Holloway looked up from her notes. "Relevance," Sterling snapped. "It goes to motive," Marla said from her seat. I stepped down. I hadn't broken. I hadn't cried. I had simply stated the reality of the siege I had lived under. Next, Marla called Jonah Pierce. Jonah did not perform. He did not use adjectives. He used a projector. "This," Jonah said, pointing to a complex flowchart on the screen, "is the trajectory of the assets belonging to Hazel Gomez and Noah Monroe." The chart looked like a map of a city's sewer system. "The blue lines represent deposits Caleb's military pay, the housing allowance, the trust fund distributions," Jonah explained, his voice dry and academic. "The red lines represent withdrawals." He tapped a key. The red lines lit up. 90% of the capital entering the household accounts was diverted within 24 hours, Jonah stated. "We have traced these funds directly to accounts held solely by Robert Monroe, Angela Monroe, and Brielle Monroe." "Mr. Pierce?" Marla asked. The defense claims these funds were used for household expenses, groceries, utilities, to support Hazel and the baby. That is mathematically impossible, Jonah said. The household expenses for a family of that size in that zip code average $4,000 a month. The withdrawals totaled over $20,000 a month. Where did the excess go? Marla asked. Luxury retail, Jonah said. Travel and debt service. He pulled up a new slide. It showed a list of credit card payments. These payments were made to cards opened in Mrs. Gomez's name, without her IP address ever logging into the accounts. The purchases on these cards include a $7,000 kitchen renovation, a $3,000 handbag, and a 10-day Mediterranean cruise. The courtroom was silent. My parents were not looking at the jury anymore. They were looking at the screen, their faces pale. They were seeing their lifestyle dissected by a forensic scalpel. Thank you, Mr. Pierce, Marla said. Defense, the judge asked. Sterling waved a hand. No questions. He knew better than to argue with math. I call Frank Callahan, Marla said. My grandfather walked to the stand. He looked like a titan. He sat down and adjusted his suit jacket. Mr. Callahan, Marla said, let us talk about the white SUV. Who owns it? My granddaughter, Hazel, Frank said. And yet, Marla said, holding up a piece of paper, the Department of Motor Vehicles has a record of a title transfer to Brielle Monroe, dated October 14th. That document is a nullity, Frank said. Why is that? Frank pulled a document from his inside pocket. He put on his reading glasses. When I gifted the vehicle to Hazel, Frank said, his voice resonating against the wood paneling, I included a restrictive covenant in the bill of sale. It is a clause I use for all family gifts to protect the assets from unforeseen predatory behavior. He looked directly at my father. The clause states that the vehicle is held in a constructive trust with Hazel Gomez as the sole beneficiary. It cannot be sold, transferred, or encumbered without the express written consent of the grantor me. I never gave that consent. Therefore, the transfer to Brielle is not just void, it is evidence of theft. Sterling jumped up. Objection. This implies criminal intent. It proves criminal intent, Frank corrected him calmly. Overruled, Judge Holloway said. Sit down. Mr. Sterling, Marla smiled. One last witness, Your Honor. I call Brielle Monroe. Brielle stood up. She smoothed her skirt. She looked annoyed rather than scared. She walked to the stand, her chin high. She was convinced she could talk her way out of this. She had been talking her way out of trouble her whole life. Ms. Monroe, Marla said, standing in the middle of the room. You have heard the testimony. You claim you were just keeping the car running for your sister. Is that correct? Yes, Brielle said, flipping her hair. Hazel was too depressed to drive. Cars break down if they sit. I was doing her a favor. A favor, Marla repeated. And did you charge her for this favor? No, Brielle scoffed. I am her sister. Then can you explain, Marla said, picking up a thick stack of paper, why you listed the vehicle on a peer-to-peer rental platform under your own name? Brielle froze. Her eyes darted to the papers. I was just testing the market, she stammered. You tested it quite well, Marla said. You rented the car out for 22 weekends. You generated $7,400 in revenue. Where is that money? Brielle? I saved it, Brielle lied quickly. I was saving it for Noah, for a rainy day. Marla turned to Jonah, who was still sitting at the expert table with his laptop open. Mr. Pierce, Marla said, can you pull up transaction number 402 from Brielle Monroe's personal checking account? Jonah tapped a key. The image appeared on the main screen. It was a transaction dated the same day as a $500 payout from the rental app. That is a purchase at Lux Nails Spa, Marla read. $180, and immediately following that, a purchase at the Golden Thread Boutique for $300. Marla looked at Brielle. Is that a rainy day fund for Noah? Marla asked. Or is that a manicure and a new jacket? I deserve to treat myself, Brielle snapped, losing her cool. I was the one dealing with Hazel's drama. I was the one keeping the family together while she moped around. So you admit you spent the money generated from Hazel's car on yourself? It wasn't her car, Brielle shouted. She didn't appreciate it. She didn't even use it. Why should she have it if she doesn't use it? The courtroom gasped. It was the logic of a thief, spoken aloud. Judge Holloway leaned forward. She took off her glasses. She looked at Brielle. Then she looked at my parents. Ms. Monroe, the judge said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried more weight than any shout. You are telling this court that you felt entitled to profit from your sister's property because you judged her to be ungrateful. I didn't say that, Brielle backpedaled. You just did, the judge said. Then, the judge turned her gaze to my father and mother. Mr. and Mrs. Monroe, Judge Holloway said. I have a question that has been bothering me since Mr. Pierce put up that chart. My father stood up, looking nervous. Yes, Your Honor. According to the testimony, the judge said, on the night of February 12th, your daughter walked 2 miles in sub-zero temperatures to buy formula because she had run out of money. Is that correct? She didn't ask us for money, my father said weakly. If she had asked, she had no access to her own funds, the judge interrupted. You had her cards, you had her allowance, you had the trust fund. The judge picked up a piece of paper from her bench. It was the transaction log Jonah had submitted. On February 12th, the judge said, reading from the paper, the same day your daughter was walking in the snow with a newborn, there is a charge on the American Express card ending in 409, the card in Hazel's name. The judge looked over the rim of her glasses. The charge is for $250, at a steakhouse, a dinner for 3. The silence in the room was absolute. My mother covered her mouth with her hand. So, the judge said, her voice turning to steel, when Hazel needed milk, you were eating steak, paid for with her credit. Is that what you call helping? My father opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked at Mr. Sterling, but the lawyer was staring at his shoes. There was no defense for that. It was visceral, it was cruel, and it was undeniable. I have heard enough, Judge Holloway said. I am ready to issue my ruling on the civil matters and the protective order. She began to shuffle the papers on her desk to find the order form, but as she moved the stack, her hand stopped on a thin blue folder that had been submitted into evidence but not discussed in detail. It was the file containing my husband's military records and the spousal support authorization. The judge opened the folder. She flipped past the first page. Then she stopped. She frowned. She brought the page closer to her face. She flipped it over to look at the back. Then she looked up. Her expression had changed. The disgust was gone, replaced by something far more serious. Shock. She looked directly at my father. Mr. Monroe, the judge said, did you assist your son-in-law, Caleb Monroe, with his pre-deployment paperwork? My father blinked, confused by the pivot. I may have mailed some forms for him. He was in a rush. You mailed them, the judge repeated. Yes, my father said. And did you witness his signature? I believe so, my father said, regaining some confidence. Like I said, we were helping. Judge Holloway slowly closed the blue folder. She placed both hands on top of it. This changes everything, she said. She looked at the bailiff standing by the door. Bailiff, lock the courtroom doors. No one leaves. A murmur of panic went through the room. Mr. Sterling stood up. Your Honor, what is the meaning of this? I have just reviewed the beneficiary designation form for Sergeant Monroe's military life insurance and his housing allowance authorization, Judge Holloway said. I noticed a notary stamp on the back page. She looked at my father with eyes that promised destruction. The notary stamp belongs to you. Mr. Monroe, you are a licensed notary, correct? Yes, my father whispered. And you notarized your own son-in-law's signature on a document that diverted federal funds to a bank account you control. He signed it, my father cried. I just stamped it. The date on the stamp, the judge said, her voice ringing out like a bell, is November 5th. She paused for effect. Sergeant Monroe deployed on October 30th. He was already in the Middle East when this document was allegedly signed and notarized in Pennsylvania. I gasped. I looked at Marla. Her eyes were wide. That is not just fraud, Judge Holloway said, her voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. That is forgery of a federal military document by a licensed official, and since you mailed it across state lines to the payment center. She looked at the court reporter. Stop typing. She looked at the bailiff. Deputies, take Robert Monroe into custody immediately. This is no longer a civil trial. This is a federal crime scene. The sound of handcuffs ratcheting shut is a very specific, mechanical noise. It is the sound of metal teeth biting into metal. And in that silent courtroom, it sounded like a guillotine blade dropping. My father did not struggle as the bailiffs pulled his arms behind his back. He looked stunned, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on a dock. He looked at Mr. Sterling, his lawyer, but Sterling had stepped away from the table, putting physical distance between himself and a client who had just been caught committing a federal crime on the record. My mother was not looking at my father. She was looking at the judge, her eyes wide with a terror that had nothing to do with her husband's freedom and everything to do with her own survival. Robert Monroe is remanded to custody pending a federal arraignment, Judge Holloway said, her voice cutting through the shock in the room. The court will forward the transcript and the evidence to the United States Attorney's Office. But we still have the civil matter to conclude. She turned her gaze back to the defense table, where my mother and Brielle sat alone, looking small and exposed. Angela Monroe, Brielle Monroe, the judge said, I am issuing a final judgment in favor of the plaintiff, Hazel Gomez. The judge picked up her pen. The scratching sound it made on the paper was the only noise in the room. I am ordering the immediate return of the vehicle to Mrs. Gomez. The fraudulent title transfer is hereby vacated. I am also ordering full restitution of the $142,680 misappropriated from the plaintiff's accounts. To this, I am adding statutory interest and punitive damages for financial fraud and coercive control, bringing the total judgment to $250,000, my mother gasped. We do not have that kind of cash liquid. We spent it on the house. Then you will sell the house, Judge Holloway said coldly. You have 30 days to satisfy the judgment before the sheriff begins seizing assets. The judge turned to me. Her face softened. Just a fraction. Mrs. Gomez, I am granting your request for a permanent protective order. Neither your parents nor your sister may come within 500 feet of you, your son, or your residence. Any violation of this order will result in immediate arrest. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor, I said. And finally, the judge said, looking at Brielle, the court is forwarding the evidence regarding the car rental scheme to the State Tax Board and the Insurance Commissioner. You were operating an unlicensed commercial rental business using a vehicle you did not own. I suspect they will have their own questions for you. Brielle put her head in her hands. The influencer who wanted to be famous was finally getting attention, but it was not the kind she wanted. Court is adjourned, Judge Holloway said. She banged the gavel. I walked out of the courtroom with Marla and Frank. I did not look back at my mother, who was crying into her hands. I did not look back at my father being led out the side door by the marshals. I walked out into the sunlight. The air was cold, but it felt clean. It felt like my own air. The aftermath came swiftly, like a landslide, because the fraud involved military documents. The investigation into my father went deep. They found more than just the forged insurance form. They found that he had been claiming me as a dependent on his own tax returns for years without my knowledge. He was facing significant prison time. My mother tried to play the victim in the community, but the police report and the court transcript leaked. In our suburban town, reputation was currency, and hers was bankrupt. The neighbors who used to come over for wine nights stopped inviting her. The charity board she sat on asked for her resignation. To pay the judgment, they had to list the estate. The house with the heated floors and the 6 bedrooms, The house where they had built my prison went on the market. It sold quickly, but the proceeds went straight to the court to pay me back. My mother had to move into a small 2-bedroom apartment on the other side of town. Brielle fared no better. The luxe life she curated online crumbled. When the rental app banned her for fraud and the state tax board audited her for the unreported income, she had to sell her designer handbags to pay the fines. She had to get a job as a receptionist at a dental office, where she couldn't check her phone every 5 minutes. I heard from a mutual friend that she told people I had ruined her. I didn't ruin her. I just turned on the lights. A week after the trial, I was sitting in Frank's study. The check from the court settlement lay on the desk. It was enough to restart my life. It was enough to buy a house. "You know," Frank said, pouring 2 cups of tea, "I have one more thing for you." He opened a drawer and pulled out a thick leather binder. "When I gave you that car," Frank said, "I knew your parents would try to control it. That is why I kept the lien on it, but I also knew that a car is a depreciating asset. It loses value every day." He slid the binder toward me. "The real gift was never the car. Hazel, the car was a test. I wanted to see if you would fight for what was yours. And you did." I opened the binder. It was a trust document, but it was different from the small one they had raided. "This is a generation skipping trust," Frank explained. "I set it up the day Noah was born. It contains a portfolio of blue-chip stocks and bonds. It is completely shielded from anyone but you and, eventually, Noah. Your parents could not have touched this even if they had your signature. It is ironclad." I looked at the valuation. It was not $50,000. It was 10 times that. "Grandpa," I choked out, This is freedom," Frank said. "This is, nobody can ever tell you to walk in the snow again money, but you do not get full access to the principal for 10 years. The dividends will pay for Noah's education and your housing. The rest grows." He looked at me with pride. "You learned the hard way that family is not about blood. It is about loyalty. And you, my dear, have earned your stripes." 2 weeks later, the day finally came. I stood at the arrivals gate at the airport. My heart was pounding, but this time it was a good rhythm. I was holding Noah, who was wearing a little camouflage jacket. The doors opened, passengers streamed out, and then I saw him. Caleb looked tired. His uniform was dusty. He had a new scar on his chin. But when he saw me, his face lit up with a brightness that outshone the airport lights. "Hazel." He dropped his duffel bag and ran. I met him halfway. He wrapped his arms around us, burying his face in my neck, then in Noah's stomach. He smelled like sand and airplane fuel and home. "I missed you," he whispered. "I missed you so much." We stood there for a long time, ignoring the people flowing around us. When he finally pulled back, he looked at me. He looked at my eyes. He saw that the fear was gone. "Ready to go home?" he asked. "Which home?" I teased. "Our home," he said. "The one they can't touch." We walked out to the parking garage. The white SUV was parked there. It had been detailed. The scratches Brielle had put on it were buffed out. The car seat was in the back, properly installed. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out the keys. For months, these keys had been the symbol of my captivity. They were the thing I wasn't allowed to have. They were the carrot my parents dangled to make me dance. I looked at them. Then I looked at Caleb. "You drive," I said, holding them out. "I want to sit in the back with Noah." Caleb shook his head. He gently closed my fingers around the fob. "No," he said softly. "You drive. You earned this ride." I smiled. I walked to the driver's side. I opened the door. I sat in the seat that was finely adjusted to my height. Not Brielle's. I put my hands on the wheel. I started the engine. The dashboard lit up. The gas tank was full. I looked in the rearview mirror. I saw my husband. Safe. I saw my son. Sleeping peacefully. I thought about my parents in their empty apartment. I thought about Brielle answering phones. I thought about the snow on the side of the road. I put the car in gear. Revenge. I realized as I pulled out of the garage and into the sunlight, isn't about burning their house down. It isn't about screaming or fighting. Revenge is simply being happy without them. It is succeeding in spite of them. It is taking the bricks they threw at you and building a fortress they are not allowed to enter. I merged onto the highway, heading toward our new rental house, toward the future, toward peace. They tried to steer me off a cliff, but I was the one behind the wheel now. And they can't drive my life anymore. Thank you so much for listening to this story of justice and reclaiming one's life. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. So please leave a comment down below with your city or country. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed seeing Hazel take back her power, please make sure to subscribe to the Maya Revenge Stories channel. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this story get recommended to more people who might need to hear it. Stay strong, and I will see you in the next video.